Today, we are going to discuss a very important issue that lies at the intersection of environmental sustainability, economic development, agriculture, urbanization, and governance, the question of how India is governing its water resources. Very often, whenever we hear discussions about India's water crisis, the issue is immediately presented as a problem of water scarcity. We are told that India is running out of water, that groundwater levels are collapsing, and that cities may soon face severe shortages. While these concerns are certainly valid, they do not fully capture the real nature of the crisis. The central argument that we must understand today is that India's water crisis is not fundamentally a crisis of absolute scarcity. Rather, it is primarily a crisis of governance, management, and inefficient utilization of available resources. This distinction is extremely important because it changes the entire framework through which we analyze the problem and search for solutions. India receives nearly 4,000 billion cubic meters of annual rainfall. This is an enormous quantity of water. Yet, only a relatively small proportion of this water is effectively stored, managed, and utilized. Therefore, the contradiction is very clear. On one hand, India receives substantial rainfall every year, but on the other hand, millions of people continue to face severe water stress. This paradox highlights the gap between water availability and water governance. As India moves toward achieving Sustainable Development Goal 6, which focuses on clean water and sanitation for all, and simultaneously pursues its larger ambition of becoming a developed nation by 2047, strengthening water governance becomes absolutely essential, not only for environmental sustainability, but also for economic growth, social justice, food security, and public health. Now, to understand the depth of this issue, we must first examine what can be called India's enduring water paradox. India possesses only around 4% of the world's freshwater resources, yet it supports nearly one-fifth of the global population. This imbalance itself creates structural pressure on water resources. According to the Niti Aayog Composite Water Management Index, nearly 600 million people in India experience high to extreme water stress. This is an extraordinary figure because it indicates that a very large segment of the population struggles with either inadequate access to water or unreliable water availability. At the same time, India's annual rainfall remains substantial. However, despite receiving such large quantities of rainfall, only around 1,100 billion cubic meters of water are considered usable. Why does this happen? The reasons are multiple. India suffers from inadequate storage infrastructure, uneven distribution of rainfall, and ecological limitations. Rainfall in India is highly seasonal and concentrated within the monsoon period. In the absence of proper storage systems, much of the water either evaporates, flows into rivers, and eventually into the sea, or contributes to floods rather than becoming available for productive use. This brings us to another major dimension of the crisis: the declining availability of water on a per capita basis. After independence, India had more than 5,000 cubic meters of water available per person annually. Today, that figure has declined to nearly 1,400 cubic meters. This decline is extremely significant because it reflects the increasing pressure on limited water resources. Rapid population growth has naturally increased demand. Simultaneously, urbanization and industrialization have expanded water consumption patterns far beyond traditional requirements. Cities require enormous quantities of water, not just for drinking purposes, but also for sanitation, industrial activity, energy production, and infrastructure development. Similarly, industries such as textiles, chemicals, steel, and power generation are highly water-intensive. As the economy expands, pressure on water resources intensifies further. Another critical issue is India's excessive dependence on groundwater. India has become the world's largest extractor of groundwater, accounting for nearly one-fourth of global groundwater usage. Groundwater has played an extremely important role in supporting Indian agriculture, food production, and rural livelihoods. In fact, the Green Revolution itself depended heavily on groundwater-based irrigation systems. However, this success has also produced long-term consequences. Excessive extraction has caused groundwater tables to decline rapidly in many regions. In several states, aquifers are being depleted faster than they can naturally recharge. This situation is particularly dangerous because groundwater functions as a hidden reserve. Once severely depleted, restoration becomes extremely difficult and time-consuming. The overdependence on groundwater also exposes weaknesses in India's regulatory framework. Groundwater extraction often remains poorly monitored and weakly regulated. In many areas, water consumption patterns are highly unsustainable, particularly where electricity subsidies encourage excessive pumping for irrigation purposes. Now, let us move toward understanding the institutional structure through which India governs its water resources. India's water governance system operates through a highly complex federal framework involving the union government, state governments, and local institutions. At the central level, the Ministry of Jal Shakti functions as the primary authority responsible for water resources, drinking water supply, and sanitation. Within this broader framework, institutions such as the Central Water Commission manage surface water planning, flood control, and river basin development. Similarly, the Central Groundwater Board monitors groundwater resources and promotes sustainable aquifer management. However, one of the most important constitutional realities is that many water-related responsibilities fall under the jurisdiction of state governments. Irrigation systems, water supply mechanisms, and local water management largely remain state subjects. This decentralized arrangement creates both opportunities and challenges. On one hand, decentralization allows policies to be adapted according to regional conditions because water challenges differ significantly across India. On the other hand, this fragmented structure often creates coordination failures, overlapping responsibilities, and policy inconsistencies. Different institutions may pursue disconnected objectives without integrated planning. River systems themselves frequently cross state boundaries, creating interstate disputes and governance complications. Therefore, India's water crisis is not simply about natural resource limitations. It is also about institutional fragmentation and weak policy coordination. Now let us discuss some of the major government initiatives designed to improve water governance. One of the most prominent initiatives is the Jal Jeevan Mission, launched in 2019. The mission aims to provide functional tap water connections to rural households across the country. Access to safe drinking water is not merely a developmental issue, but also a question of dignity, public health, and social equity. Recognizing the scale of the challenge, the mission has now been extended until 2028 to achieve universal rural coverage. Another important program is the Atal Bhujal Yojana. This initiative focuses specifically on groundwater management through community participation. It promotes local water budgeting, monitoring, and participatory decision-making in water-stressed regions. This approach is important because sustainable water management cannot be achieved solely through top-down bureaucratic interventions. Community involvement is essential for long-term success. The government has also launched the Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana, which seeks to improve irrigation efficiency and promote micro-irrigation systems. This is particularly significant because agriculture consumes the largest share of India's freshwater resources. Traditional irrigation methods often result in enormous wastage. Therefore, improving irrigation efficiency through technologies such as drip irrigation and sprinkler systems becomes essential for sustainable agriculture. Urban water management has also emerged as a major priority. Rapid urbanization has intensified challenges related to water supply, sewage treatment, and wastewater management. To address these issues, the government launched the Atal Mission for Rejuvenation and Urban Transformation, commonly known as Amrit. This program focuses on strengthening urban water infrastructure, sewage systems, and wastewater reuse. Similarly, the Namami Gange program seeks to combine pollution control, ecological restoration, and sewage treatment within the Ganga basin. The program reflects the understanding that rivers cannot be viewed merely as water channels. They are ecological systems that sustain biodiversity, agriculture, culture, and livelihoods. Now, while these initiatives represent important progress, India's future water strategy increasingly requires a more comprehensive transformation. This brings us to the idea of a circular water economy. Traditionally, water usage has often followed a linear pattern: extraction, consumption, and disposal. However, under circular water economy, the emphasis shifts toward conservation, recycling, reuse, and efficient utilization. For example, expanding wastewater recycling in urban areas can significantly reduce pressure on freshwater resources. Treated wastewater can be reused for industrial purposes, landscaping, and even certain agricultural applications. Similarly, better crop selection can reduce excessive water consumption. Certain crops require enormous quantities of water and may not be suitable for water-stressed regions. Therefore, agricultural planning must align more closely with ecological realities. Technological innovation will also play a central role in ensuring sustainability. Scientific planning, data-driven water monitoring systems, satellite mapping, smart irrigation technologies, and efficient storage infrastructure can substantially improve resource management. At the same time, technology alone cannot solve the crisis. Public participation and behavioral change are equally important. Water conservation must become part of social consciousness. Efficient governance systems, stronger regulations, and active citizen engagement are all necessary for transforming India's water economy from one driven by scarcity and overexploitation into one based on resilience and sustainability. As we conclude this discussion, we must return to the central idea with which we began. India's water crisis is fundamentally a challenge of governance rather than merely a shortage of water. Weak institutional coordination, excessive groundwater dependence, fragmented policymaking, and inefficient utilization have intensified the crisis despite substantial annual rainfall. Therefore, the solution does not lie only in searching for more water sources. The solution lies in governing existing resources more intelligently, scientifically, and sustainably. Effective water governance requires integrated planning, stronger infrastructure, technological innovation, ecological sensitivity, and widespread public participation. In the 21st century, water security will become one of the defining foundations of national development. The way India manages its water resources will directly shape its environmental sustainability, agricultural productivity, economic growth, public health outcomes, and social stability. Ultimately, sustainable water governance is not simply an environmental necessity. It is a developmental imperative and a civilizational responsibility for India's future.